bridging the gap of inequality in education right here in the country. And to help me in this conversation, I'm joined by Bosire, who is head of recruitment at Teach for Kenya, and also Carolyne, who is also a Teach for Kenya fellow. Karibuni sana.
Thank you.
I'll start with you, Brian. When you talk about education inequality, according to you, what are we talking about?
Well, according to me, we live in a country where you are born determines the kind of education that you receive, and actually the quality of education that you receive.
Yes.
No one really writes a letter to state, I want to be born in a particular family. But we live in a country where, for example, children who have been raised up in underserved communities experience a lot of inequality. So according to me, education inequality is the unequal distribution of resources, ranging from infrastructure, ranging from the teacher staff, as well as, resources such as textbooks, the unequal distribution of these resources across board or across learners in our country.
What about you, Carolyne? What do you understand, or according to you, what is education inequality?
Just like Brian has said, it mostly refers to the unequal distribution of resources in the education system. But I'm also going to add and say it is the lack of customization of education for the different children we have in the different areas in schools. We are treating the student in Nairobi the same way we are treating a student in Moyale, the same way we are treating a student in Samburu, where we're having bandit attacks, and we're putting them all under one umbrella. And for me, that is a very clear description of what education inequality is.
Yes, so according to you, education, for it to be, for there to be equity in education, it should be tailored according to the needs of the students in a particular area?
Yes. It is very important that we tailor make and customize education for our various learners in their different environments. Because here's the thing, you're not going to tell a student in let us use Samburu because of the ongoing bandit attacks. These children have missed days and months of schooling in the calendar, and we are going to subject them to the exam the same way we are subjecting a person, a child in Nairobi who has been in class all along, who has had resources available to them, who has textbooks, and we're putting them in an exam in the same time period, and we're expecting them to all deliver.
Yes.
You see?
Yeah.
So we are not really being fair to this child who has missed school, who has extenuating circumstances that are not allowing them to put their best foot forward, even in their learning, because they're not even okay mentally, they're not okay physically. Some of them have not eaten, they're scared for their security. Others have had to drop out. And you see, it's not really a situation that is speaking to equity and equality in the education space.
Brian, talk about the role of resources and infrastructure in enhancing quality education, especially when it comes in marginalized areas in the country.
Well, resources have a big part to play in enabling children really have access to quality education. Let's speak, for instance, infrastructures like school buildings, for example. We are today witnessing climate change, floods, it's flooding all over in the country, and rain. And where will you learn if you're not able to be in a school setup that shields you from the rain or adverse weather conditions? People who are coming from ASAL regions, for example, because of the extreme temperatures, it hinders them from accessing quality education. Let's speak about resources such as textbooks, for example. They play a complementary role in helping a child understand the concept that they need to learn so that they can be able to chart a path that they want to be in the future. So lack of access to such kind of resources, be it textbook, be it infrastructure such as schools and classroom, be it even the teachers themselves. Most of the ASAL regions and schools which are located in underserved communities, you realize that there is a high teacher to student ratio.
Yes.
So a teacher, for example, who has to manage a class of between 80 to 140 students will not enable that child who is in that classroom will not be able to have access to quality education because they have different needs. Their level of understanding and concept grabbing is very different, and they need tailor-made solutions so that they can be able to have access to this quality education. So when these resources are not distributed equally, then it hinders this child from accessing quality education.
Actually, you said that, and something about access to education and access to quality education comes up. What is the difference between the two? I'd love to hear your perspective, your both perspectives, and let me start with you, Brian. Access to education and access to quality education. What is the difference?
Well, in Swahili they will say, bora elimu ama elimu bora. Just going to school alone doesn't necessarily mean you are educated. But the education you receive, I'll define quality education as education that you receive that will enable you to solve the challenges that you are experiencing. It will make sense for me, for example, I grew up in Dandora, for example. Having gone to school, some of the challenges you used to experience is, we come from a humble background. So the education that I receive should be able to help me find means of enabling me to earn a living. To me, that's how I'll define quality education. An education that I receive that will enable me to chart a career path, that will enable me be successful in whatever it is that I'm passionate about and I desire to be when I succeed, so that I'm able to provide for myself and be a solution maker rather than someone who just complains about the problems that are around me or the challenges that we're experiencing. So if I go through the education system, quality education should enable me to become a solution maker to the challenges and the problem that I face as an individual, I face as a community, and what we face as a country.
Yes. Carolyne, talk to me about what you think quality education is and access to just education.
I'm going to borrow from what Brian has said. Access to education. Anyone can go to school. We have so many people who've gone to school. We have so many people who have even gone to higher education places, and they're just there. But access to quality education is access to education that enables you to find a higher calling, education that enables you to develop a leadership and a purpose, a sense of purpose in an area of your life. For example, something that I'm learning and I'm discovering as I go along my fellowship journey is that access to quality education is getting education that enables you to address systemic issues and address emerging issues in our surroundings and in our environment. For example, right now, sustainable development goals are very big right now.
Yes.
And education, quality education is SDG number 4. Yeah. But it is one thing to just go through education and you just get education and you say, I am passionate about SDG number 4. But it is another thing to get into the education space, be a teacher leader, lead your learners, and enable them to discover the spheres of even the other SDGs and how they are able to make impact in the different areas of their lives that are going to help them to come up with even global solutions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Both of you are involved in an initiative called Teach for Kenya. Brian, what is it about? And what are you doing to enhance the aspect of quality education?
Okay. Teach for Kenya, we are a non-profit and we are big on implementing sustainable development goal number 4. That is quality education for all, regardless of their social economic background. How we do this is we build a movement of young leaders who are passionate about ending education inequality. We believe that the challenges or the inequalities we are facing as a country, we do not have a one-fit solution for all, or we don't have one solution that can fit, that can solve all the inequalities that we're experiencing. Yeah. And so we build a movement of young leaders who will help us end these education inequalities, because we believe it needs a multidisciplinary approach. We need leaders who will be able to groom local or homemade solutions to be able to champion solutions that will end this education inequality. So every year we recruit graduates from diverse academic backgrounds who are passionate about working with kids and ending education inequalities. And we give them an opportunity for 2 years where they work in these underserved communities, where they act, first of all, as teacher leaders, as role models, enabling these children have access to quality education. And the second thing is, during their first year, they get to observe what are some of these challenges that these children are experiencing that are preventing them from accessing quality education. And because we don't want to groom leaders who will always be saying, why is the government not doing this, or why is this agency not doing this? In their second year, we challenge them to do a capstone project where we ask them, using the locally available resources that are within your reach, can you come up with a project or a homemade solution to mitigate some of the challenges that you are able to experience, in your first year of fellowship, that are preventing your learners from accessing quality education?
Carolyne, I'd love you're also involved in this initiative.
Yes, I
as a fellow. What would you say is the impact of efforts in reducing or stemming out inequality in education from your own experience?
From my experience, I'm a fellow at Gramojoy Primary School. It's in Njenga slums. And the impact, I can say, is huge. It is massive. First of all, you come to our schools and you're going to realize that we have very versatile learners. And one of the things that we champion for, even in our race for equality in education, is creating customized learning experiences for our learners. So we are not just singing to the choir. We are trying to reach each and every individual child. We are trying to find out their strengths. We are trying to bring out those strengths. And we're using an approach called the teaching as collective leadership, where number one, we view our students as our learners as leaders. Number two, we view ourselves as the teachers. We view ourselves as learners. Number three, our community is power. And number four, our work is systemic. So when we combine all these elements of teaching as collective leadership, we are able to come up with a framework that makes sure that we are not just having learners who are singing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H and passing the exams and going home. We are able to come up with learners who are singing, yes, A, B, C, D, passing exams, going home, but they are also able to speak for themselves, to address issues, to express themselves, to express things like empathy, to be digitally literate, and it is really amazing to see.
How would you say that affects on their individual performances as pupils and students?
It brings out a very cultured learner. That is number one. Because here you have a learner who is number one, they're able to express themselves respectfully and openly. So now this is a child who is not going to go out there, get intimidated and come with their tail between their legs and be like, oh yeah. But they are a learner who is going to express themselves and tell you, hi teacher. There sometimes they even come and tell you, hi teacher, today you did this and it did not feel, you see. So now there are learners who are able to express themselves. They're able to express emotions like empathy. They're able to learn how to live with one another, to collaborate together. They have critical thinking skills that are beyond, you see. So now it is all about cultivating these skills out of them. And it is not just about taking it from yourself and putting it in them. It is letting them know that it is inside them, and our work is just to draw it out and let them see that even as you excel in your academics, you also need this and this and this and this to be able to excel outside here in life.
Yes. Brian, are there technological or technology-based initiatives that can help address this inequality we are talking about?
Yes, definitely. We live in an age where AI is really coming up. There was a certain conference that I attended earlier on in the year, and it was saying by the year 2030, 70% of the jobs that we will be doing currently even don't exist.
Yes.
So it goes without saying that we live in an age where it will really be unfair if we do not expose our children to digital literacy. And yes, technology really does play a big role in enabling these children have access to quality education. I'll give you an example. One of the organizations we have partnered with is called Profuturo, which we partner with them and we train teachers on digital literacy, on how they can use simple things such as Excel or the Google Suite packages and incorporate it in the classroom. So there's this one particular teacher in one of the communities that we serve, that one day she was teaching poetry. But then you realize that because of the limited number of resources that we have, or the resources that the school had, she did not have a lot of examples that she could share with the students. So she started an initiative where she asked the students to bring 5 shillings that they will use to buy data every week. And as a result, they will use their smartphone and use Google to find more poems that they will be able to use to enable the kids get a diverse portfolio of different kinds of poems so that they will be able to enrich the lessons that they have in class. So yeah, digital literacy is something that you are key in, and when used effectively, it can enable the learner, open up their mind, become more critical thinkers, and far beyond that, they will be able to adapt to the change that is happening in our society and in our globe from time to time.
But even as such, there are schools, many schools that do not even have access to computers. How then are we going to address that aspect and ensure, in as far as digital literacy is concerned, every pupil in every school is accessing it? Is it a case where the government needs to channel resources to providing digital infrastructure to schools?
Yes, I think it's not just a problem of the government alone, because the government has already done its part. If you go to most public institutions, we already have the digital devices. But the problem is, most of the times when you visit some of these institutions, the digital devices are locked up in a room somewhere where they are gathering dust, for fear that if the children get to use it, maybe they may spoil it, because they are treated as very precious, precious items. So two things I think about this. One is, how can we have more young people in the education space? How can we as a country make teaching such a noble profession? Because it is a noble profession. We live in a country where teachers, when you ask people, not so many people will be eager to say, when I grow up, I want to be a teacher. We have customized being a doctor, being a pilot, or maybe being an engineer as the supreme thing. But the truth is, teaching is such a noble profession. First of all, if we have more young people in the education space, they will be able to embrace technology, because this is something that they have grown up, it's an era they have grown up in, and they will be able to inculcate those skills to young people. So that is one. Two, we also need more people channeling energy. So if there are donors out there who can be able to donate some of these digital devices, some that are able to operate without Wi-Fi.
Just a minute, your microphone has developed problems, but we'll sort that out. I'd want to know from you, what is the impact, or how does the teacher-student relationship affect the quality of education that they get?
The teacher-student relationship, it is very critical to what your learner is going to get in a classroom.
Yes.
Number one, it's going to determine whether these learners are going to view you as a safe space. It's going to determine whether these learners are going to look at you and fear you. And some of the things, there are three things that a learner asks themselves before they are able to grasp anything in a classroom. Number one is, am I safe? Number two is, am I loved? Number three is, what can I learn today? So what they are going to learn today is not exactly the first thing they're thinking about. They're first looking out for themselves, their safety, and the feeling of being loved. So you see, as a teacher, you have to develop a relationship with your learners where it is, you show them that you love them, and you show them that you are a safe space, and you become a safe space by earning their trust. Because one thing about the learners, and especially the younger learners, I realized, is they're very keen, and they're very wise, and they're very sharp. So they're very quickly able to learn to know, I can trust you, I cannot trust you. So now when you develop a sense of trust with your learners, and they realize that, oh, teacher loves us, they're able to now get into the groove of what they're able to learn from you, and they're even eager. So you give them even home fun, they're like, I went and did home fun, and they're like, I saw. So you come to the class, and it's a very interactive class, as opposed to having a lecture-like classroom where you're just talking and passing information. So it becomes more of an interaction in the classroom because of the good relationship that you have with your learners.
Thank you. How or what criteria do you use to select your fellows that are participating in this initiative?
So one of the things we believe, one of our core values as an organization is Harambe. So we believe as an organization that we are able to create solutions to some of the challenges we are facing as a country. So every year we recruit graduates from diverse academic backgrounds, and the qualifications for you to work with us is, you must be a Kenyan citizen under the age of 35, you must be a graduate or in your final year of study, and it goes without saying you should be passionate about working with kids. So once you express your interest, currently our application is open. You just visit our website, you apply, you fill the eligibility form, which is like 2 minutes, then that will help us assess if you're eligible to join our program. Once you do that, then we'll prompt you to do an essay. where you will get to express, why do you want to join the program? What's your motivation? Are there things that you are passionate about the Kenyan education space that you want to change? And is there a leadership experience that you have? Once you do that, we use that to assess you through our competencies, where we are looking for, are you passionate about working with kids? Are you resilient? Are you aligned to our vision as an organization, which is that one day every Kenyan child will have access to quality education? Those who pass that stage are invited to an assessment center, which is a half-day long interview where we get to interact with them. They get to do a demo teaching lesson, they get to do a group discussion, and around a 30 minutes long interview where we interact with them to try and assess what is their interest, know, and are they willing to give 2 years of their time to serve the communities that we work with.
Yes, thank you so much. We shift gears a little bit and head to Westlands, where the Engineering Partnership Convention is happening, and the PS in the State Department for Roads in the Ministry of Transport, Engineer Joseph Mbugua, is speaking right now. We cross over and find out more. Media launch that is happening in Westlands, and some of the things he has said the convention is a chance to showcase the role of engineers in economic progression, and also how engineering has helped in enhancing infrastructure, economy, and the society. It's also a chance for to enhance global competitiveness in engineering. Of course, we'll be bringing more of this in our subsequent bulletin. And right now, we continue with the conversation that we were having earlier on about addressing inequalities in education. And Carolyne, I'd want to hear from you. What drove you to be part of this initiative of Teach for Kenya?
First of all, I'm a graduate of communication and journalism. But I also realized that I have a passion for children and education. And so when I was scrolling on LinkedIn, and I saw Teach for Kenya, and I was like, what is this exactly? And so I went to their website and I learned about them, and I was like, oh, this is really nice. And so I applied, and I'm happy that I got in, because then this has been one of the most fulfilling times of my life. Because of the work that you get to do every day with the children you get to impact, with the interactions I get to have, because children are such pure souls, and we live in a world that is so hateful at the moment, even with social media and the world itself. Even you just watch the news every day, it's depressing and depressing and depressing. And in the areas that we serve, these are the kinds of environment that these children live in. So to wake up every day and to be the window through which a child can see sunshine and see hope and feel loved and feel safe, it is something that is really nice and really beautiful.
Yes. According to you, Brian, are there policy reforms that that can be implemented to enhance quality of education in the country?
Definitely. There are many. It's part of our Kenyan law says that it's the right of every Kenyan child to have access to quality education. Definitely for me, it's not actually the matter of actually the policies, but it's the implementation of what are the frameworks around making sure that really that is the reality, that every Kenyan child accesses quality education. And this is the discussion we need to all have as a country, you know. How can we support children who are coming from marginalized areas? Because really, no one gets to choose where they are born. No one writes a letter and says, I want to be born in Nairobi, or I want to be born in Marsabit, or I want to be born in Mandera. We all find ourselves, we already born. But the fact that we already born, we still have, we need to have access to quality education. So we need to have this conversation as a country. How can we, first of all, as young people, be involved in the education space so that this is not just a thing about the government, even us as Kenyan citizens, because we can't just sit aloof and say, you know, that is just the problem. The government is the only one who is the agency that is mandated to deal with education. We all have a role to play. We all have a role to play, because by voting for the right leadership, that is how we are able to implement some of these policies in the ground. How do we support equal distribution of resources, for example? How do we make sure that the child who is born and bred in Marsabit, instead of learning, white as snow, they're able to learn as white as milk, something that they're able to relate with, rather than something that is foreign, probably they might never see, based on the environment that they are growing in. So for me, it's more of how can we implement these policies and make them, because the policies are there. We sit in conferences, meetings happen with government, and policies are made. But the biggest challenge is how do we implement these policies and make sure that the policies that we have in our constitution, in our education framework, are really implemented in the ground. And that's why we say we need a multidisciplinary approach. It's not a one thing. We need the government, we need both people in the private sector and the non-profit sector to work together. We need engineers, even as the summit is going on, to also think of how can we have better school structures. We need lawyers in the ground to think of how can we have more advocacy to promote children education, or the right of every Kenyan child to have access to quality education. We need doctors, or even need nutritionists, because you can't teach a hungry child. So how can we make sure that we provide food to these learners? Because those are some of the things that prevent them. Because when a child is hungry, they won't be able to grasp, if they're in secondary, more concepts such as calculus or any other concept. So how do we all work together? For me, that's the big question. And beyond just saying the government is not doing this, one of the things that I believe we can be able to do is, what is that one thing that you can be able to do as an individual? And that one thing can have such a ripple effect to enabling every Kenyan child to have access to quality education. You who is watching us, you can say, I'll just be donating one textbook. Another person can say, I'll be giving my time to visit these schools to encourage them, to be part. And when we all embrace the spirit of Harambee, and as young people we decide and realize that we are not leaders of tomorrow, but we are leaders of today, that within us, within the resources that are within our reach, we are able to utilize them to enable every Kenyan child have access to quality education, then we will be able to bring the dream nearer, that one day every Kenyan child will have access to quality education, regardless of their social economic background, a reality.
Yes. What would you say, Carolyne, is the role of the community in as far as advocating for quality of education is concerned?
I think, first of all, most people don't realize just how powerful the community is in the education framework. Community is not just the parents, because mostly we assume it's just the learners, the teachers, and the parents. Each and every person walking around is part of a community that shapes the life of a child. And therefore, because this child interacts with different people at different times of the day, they come to school in the morning, interact with teachers, other learners, with maybe parents if they come into school. They go home, they interact with their parents, but also they have friends, they go to shops, they go to church, they go to different places. So you see, it is a very systemic thing that if all of us realized and came together, we'd create a very powerful system that would even be able to speak truth to power and speak to the situations that are going on in our education system and make sure that they are being addressed. Because if all of us spoke up to issues surrounding maybe teacher-student ratio, I'm very sure that if each and every person was concerned about it, then we'd be able to find solutions that are going to be equitable and fair, and ensure that even as we have 140 learners in a classroom, we also have 3 or 4 teachers to complement them, you see, and to be able to ensure that the systems that are being created, like Brian said, they need to be implemented. And it does not take just the government or just the teachers or just TSC or just Teach for Kenya or just people in the education sector to ensure that these things are being implemented. It takes each and every one of us. You are a parent, you are even if you're selling something by the roadside, you are a parent by proxy, because there are children who are going to come and buy from you. There are children who are going to interact with children, and these children, they learn. Because I think we forget that the education is not just in the classroom. It is everywhere. So the children pick up things each and every place. And if we are not able as a community to realize that we have power and we influence these children in many ways, then we are going to lose out on a lot.
Brian, I would want to hear from you. In a school setting, how the student-teacher relationship affects their motivation and attitudes towards learning. How does that relationship affect motivation and attitudes of a student towards learning?
Let's just take a typical example of some of the schools that we have partnered with. The average ratio is 1 is to 80. So let's say a teacher comes to class and they ask a question, you know, how many, you know, maybe how many are able to complete this sum, for example, maybe it can be 3 times 9. How many students are going to raise their hands? Very few, of course, or maybe even if it's a lot, but definitely not everyone will get an opportunity to interact with the teacher. Maybe the few who will be selected will be given their attention. So what happens to these others who perhaps they were not able to raise their hand?
Yes.
Or what if they raised their hand and maybe they were not selected? So how do we work with that? The thing is, learning, as I know it, I know, like, for example, teachers have a very big role to play in influencing in terms of how we learn. And this goes with what my colleague was saying in terms of, does the teacher trust me? Does the teacher create a safe space for me to learn? So if I'm in a classroom where I feel the teacher doesn't care about me, the teacher doesn't give me attention, the teacher doesn't really care whether I get something right or wrong, then that is going to affect how I'm going to grasp learning. And truth be said, in a class ratio of 1 teacher is to 80 students, definitely this teacher will be overwhelmed to give attention to every student, because in a class there are those who are hyperactive, who will want the attention of the teacher. There are those who are naturally introverted. They will wait for the teacher to push. And if the ratios are still high, definitely the quality of education that this learner will be getting is definitely affected.
Does Teach for Kenya work with the Ministry of Education?
Yes, so we currently have a memorandum of agreement with the Ministry of Education. And the memorandum, we work both with the national government and the county governments. We are currently in 3 counties, that is Nairobi, Machakos, and Kisumu. And it is the ministry that gives us the school where we serve, because schools are under the Ministry of Education. So they're the people who give us the schools and tell us, you know, this is the school that is experiencing the most, you know, maybe it's under-resourced or understaffed, and they're the people who help us know where to place our fellows. So we don't do that in proxy.
Yes. Carolyne, are we heading in the right direction in as far addressing this issue is concerned?
I think one step at a time we are heading in the right direction. We still have ways to go, but the fact that we have more organizations and more people who are becoming more passionate and becoming voices and becoming thought leaders in the field of education and in ensuring that we are bridging the gap in education inequality, I think it is definitely a step in the right direction, but still more needs to be done. More people need to come on board, and we all need to be champions of education.
Yes. Yeah. Brian, your parting shot.
The parting shot, the famous word of Nelson Mandela: education still remains to be the most powerful tool we can use to change the world.
Yes.
So what are some of the biggest challenges we are facing as a country? We're still facing poverty, health, we still have poor health systems, we still have poor governance, poor leadership. And one of the best solutions that can help us overcome the biggest barriers we are facing as a country is education. Yes. So if we have a nation that is educated, if you have a nation or a citizenry that is educated, then we will be able to solve some of the biggest challenges we are facing as individuals, we are facing as a community, we are facing as a country, and we are even facing as a globe generally. So let's get educated, and you who is listening me today, can you decide today to become a champion of education? Yes. Only when we all decide can we ensure that one day every Kenyan child will have access to quality education.
Yes. Carolyne,
it takes a village, and please be part of the village to ensure education inequality is addressed and that we're bridging the gap. Be the voice, be the change.
Yes.
Because I am the change.
Yes.